Hello everyone, myself Hitesh, and today along with my colleague Arun, I will be demonstrating an economic analysis to a media story that came on 5th of October around the new oil war as OPEC moves against the US regarding the production cut of crude oil. Previously, like 50 years back, the OPEC, which includes Saudi and UAE, halted oil supplies to Western countries who had supported Israel. Now the same story is again coming up when OPEC decided to cut 2 million barrels of production output, or we can say it's nearly a 2% of a global supply, when oil is trading at high time of $90 per barrel, which will further increase the price of a crude oil, and thereafter because of which it's inviting a world economy by putting pressure of inflation, and it will create a problems between producers and consumer countries like US and Saudi. Throughout this presentation, we will be discussing about the OPEC effect of production cut on global economy and what is the impact on US and Saudi, and some conclusions. Thank you.
Over the last 150 years, oil plays an influential role in the global economy as the world's primary fuel source. It has shaped our world in many important ways. Oil has had many benefits and applications in our world, in industries, in medicines, at home, and in transportation. The cost of these products can be affected by the fluctuating prices of oil, which is determined by the supply and demand and a collective action of an organization called OPEC. OPEC stands for Organizations of Petroleum Exporting Companies, which was established in 1960 by the founding members Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela. Currently, it has 13 permanent members, including UAE. The group was mainly created to monitor the stability and prices of the petroleum market with an aim of fixing the worldwide supply of oil and its price. 80% of the world's proven oil resource currently located within the OPEC member countries. OPEC nations produces 30% of the world crude oil and also controls 50% of the global oil supplies. Saudi Arabia is the biggest single oil producer within the OPEC, producing more than 10 million barrels a day. In 2016, when the oil prices was particularly low, OPEC joined forces with 10 other countries to create OPEC Plus. These members include Russia, which also produces over 10 million barrels a day. On October 5th, decision by OPEC Plus, which includes 23 oil producers led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, has decided to cut production quotas by 2 million barrels per day starting this November. This accounts to 2% of the world's global supply. The decision by OPEC will have severe impact on the world's economy as most of the countries are heading towards a global recession. The production cut will create a supply demand mismatch and will eventually hurt the consumers. This will head towards a higher inflation. For instance, US has reached the highest level of inflation of 8.3%. Oil price going up is a major cause of recession. As oil price increases, it helps Russia to fund the war against Ukraine. As Second, mainly it's also going to hurt Europe. Current situation in Europe is not positive. If energy bills increases, the government needs to borrow more money, and which will lead to investor pessimism, and also will help them head towards an economic downturn and also towards the recession.
Now we will discuss the impact of a production cut on US. US strongly condemned this decision, and they are arguing that due to production cut, Russia would utilize the higher oil prices to fund its operations in war in Ukraine, as Russia is also a member of a OPEC plus. In terms of a consumer and economy of the US, due to the higher oil prices, there would be a consumers lining up on the petrol pumps. Also, the higher oil prices would impact the higher transportation costs and also increase the business cost. There would be a higher, a US nation trade deficit as well. In this particular year, the US market rate is currently trading at 25-year low. In September month, US companies have fired around 30K employees all over the country. There has been some of the initiatives which are taken by the US to combat this decision. Biden administration officials said that the US would release another 10 million barrels from its strategic reserve next month as a part of previously announced 180 million barrels of oils. US is preparing to ease its sanctions on the oil producer Venezuela. As part of the environmental pact, they are promoting and developing chemicals that can be utilized in the manufacturing of electrical vehicles. They want to rely on the electrical vehicles now. Moreover, US is planning to freeze all cooperations with Saudi, as well as they are planning to halt their treaties with Saudi in terms of army and missile chain. You can see that mortgage rate is currently trading at 6.75, which is very low in last 30 years. Now we will discuss the impact of a production cut on Saudi Arabia and Russia. Saudi Arabia is looking at economic indicators that point towards a global recession within the next 6 to 9 months, which could lead to an oil price crash. Saudi Arabia has also been concerned about the flood of oil from emergency stockpiles of Western nations. It's being said that roughly 180 million barrels have been released globally since March, and 75% of that has came from the US strategic reserves, which has caused global supply to get ahead of the demand. So that's one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia may lead OPEC Plus to take some of oil from the market so that supply and demand can get more in balance. Some of the impact of this news on Saudi and Russia is, since GDP is most of these countries remains highly dependent on the oil revenues, so the reduction of output could result in significantly lower GDP. Whenever oil prices experience an increase, an oil exporting country enjoys large capital inflows in the form of foreign currency, which leads to a domestic exchange rate appreciation. Also, since the export of energy resources is highly taxed, with an oil price increase, the energy exporting country will have a fiscal output and an increase in government spending. You can see in the pie chart that Saudi Arabia is supplying, exporting its oil to the 77% to the Asian, 7% to the US. In terms of Russia, they could enjoy this production cut, and they can, as per the comment by the US, they can use this revenue to finance its Ukraine war. As you can see from this chart, till Feb 2022, there was an undersupplied, but right now it's an oversupply. Now we will move to the conclusion side. Thank you.
After evaluating and examining all the scenarios, we have come up with few recommendations. US can proceed in issuing something called the NOPEC bill, which is No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Bill. US could seize assets of the OPEC countries, assets within the US jurisdictions, ease of regulatory burden and offering unwavering support to the US oil gas industry. This could lower the global prices and also it could eventually eat into Saudi Arabia's oil profit. Speeding up the regulatory process and easing up certain tariffs could also help revive the economy. United States can legitimize and strengthen its rules by halting, delaying, or interfering with the sale of American equipment to Saudi Arabia. Whereas Europe is also heavily affected, they could also enforce a price gap strategy, which means all the European countries will come together and agree on a possible price that where then they will trade in with the other countries for the oil prices. Certainly, the reduction of the oil production will cause a ripple effect in the economy and also will create a downturn and helping them to lead into a recession in the upcoming year. Thank you.